Hi guys, and welcome back to another edition of the True Crime Show with myself, Kevin Moore. Now this features the most shocking killers in true crime history and the authors that have written about them. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined with my guest, John Ferrick. Now John has previously spent 5 years with the Wisconsin Investigative Team for USA Today Network and 9 years in Nebraska at the World-Herald newspaper. Now, he's an authority on wrongful arrest and conviction cases, and he joins me today to discuss his latest book, Wrecking Crew, Demolishing the Case Against Steven Avery. Now, I just want to say here that the Steven Avery and Brandon Dassey case is a large case, and to really give the subject matter a fair interview, I really need to sort of spend many weeks researching this interview, but I'm making my own true crime docuseries right now with Mark Richards, so I've been able to do some research on this case, and I will just let my guest John do a lot of the talking right now. So let me just welcome my guest on. So John Ferrick, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
John, this is going to be a really fascinating interview, I hope, for so many people that are going to watch this as well. And I know you've done numerous interviews on this particular book as well, your latest book, Wrecking Crew. But first of all, for those who may not know what the Wrecking Crew is about, just give us a brief synopsis of that, please.
Wrecking Crew really is about the Steven Avery case, the case that became famous through the two different episodes of Making a Murderer, which became a huge, fascinating hit, just blew everything away on Netflix. So it's the story of Steven Avery, man from Wisconsin who's been wrongfully convicted, lost 18 years of his life in prison for a sexual assault he didn't commit. And then while he's waiting to get a $36 million settlement from the police that had framed him the first time around, lo and behold, he gets arrested for a murder that happened near his property in Manitowoc, Wisconsin.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously, how did you get into this particular story? Because obviously, you've done previous true crime books before. What drew you
Correct.
to this one?
Well, this one was interesting because it was kind of time and place. I happened to be back in the state of Wisconsin, Kevin, while the Making a Murderer series hit the airwaves in December of 2015. So I was a journalist for the USA Today, their investigative team based in Wisconsin. And since the Steven Avery case was a huge Wisconsin case and crime, and everybody was enthralled by it and really wanted to know what happened, I drew the assignment to do a lot of investigative journalism after Making a Murderer came out, really to dig into the case, to try to get to the truth of the matter. And then all these stories that I did really led me to the point where I felt that I had enough material to put together a book that really had never been done before. There had been a couple of books that were really, anti-Steve Avery, that were really of the opinion that, hey, this bastard needs to fry in prison. The police don't make mistakes. Prosecutors are always right. So there was a few of those kind of books that had already been produced, but there really hadn't been anything done in the state of Wisconsin that really took a look at the case from a very critical eye, Kevin, and really, dissected the evidence to really give people an honest perspective. I didn't have a dog in the fight. I wasn't a prosecutor. I wasn't a defense attorney, wasn't a family member, wasn't related to the victim. So I was there as an honest, neutral observer, as a reporter, and basically put this book together to let the public decide for themselves, what the truth about Steven Avery's conviction.
Your background is in the print background, but you trained as a journalist, did you?
Yes, that's correct, Kevin. I worked. I have about 25 years now in the field as a journalist. The last 3 years I've done exclusively as a digital journalist here in the United States, but I had over 20 years as a print journalist in several states in the United States.
And had you heard of the case prior to the Netflix documentary?
I had, and it's interesting because I lived in Wisconsin from 2000 through 2003. So actually, I was in Wisconsin right before the Teresa Halbach murder happened in 2005. I was aware of Steve Avery as far as he was, when I left Wisconsin, this was the guy that was making headlines because he had just gotten released from prison for losing 18 years of his life for the sexual assault that happened. So that's the Steve Avery I knew when I left Wisconsin and moved to Nebraska. I was in Nebraska when the 2005 when the murder happened, and I'm reading stories about Stephen Avery's arrested. There's all kinds of evidence. There's blood in the house. And I didn't know anything about the case other than just the little snippets I was reading out in Nebraska at the time.
Okay, so how much research went into this book? How many years did you spend on this book?
I spent, basically from December 2015 when the documentary came out to the summer of 17, I remained as a journalist in Wisconsin. So, and then the book came out in November of 18. So that's about I'm going 2 to 2.5 years of time that I spent putting the book together. Pretty much, I relied on some of my reporting, but a lot of the book is really kind of using my reporting to springboard and really do it. It took my reporting to a different level, a more in-depth level that, again, you would never get out of a newspaper story per se.
Absolutely. And did you go down to the courthouse and, go through the court records there as well? And
yeah, I did that a lot when I was in Wisconsin. It was about an hour drive every time because I was based in Appleton, Wisconsin, which was about about an hour's drive away from Manitowoc County. So I was always super careful that I never got caught speeding because I figured if the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office ever caught me on the road, who knows what would have happened to me, just because of the stories that I was already doing at that point in time that were pretty hard hitting, and revelatory. I kind of had a target on my back, to begin with as a journalist there, which I was fine with, because again, I go where the stories take me, and I had no problem writing stories that were taking a very, very critical, hard look at the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office and their role in this possible wrongful conviction.
Did you ever write to Stephen or Brandon?
I did not with Stephen. Just because his case was still an appeal process. But two things I could point out. I worked closely through his attorney Kathleen Zellner, so I did countless interviews with Kathleen Zellner in person or over the phone. And then I also did, and she was very instrumental as far as I interviewed her extensively as far as, putting this book together. Had access to Stephen Avery's family. So I went out to the Avery salvage yard and met with his brothers, Earl and Chuck, and even, mom and dad occasionally. So I've been out to the Avery salvage yard numerous times. It's just for the logistics of the book. The book was going to be more about what were the other people doing behind the scenes and how they're trying to get Stephen free. And Stephen still worked into the book. I have some letters that he had written, that I was able to put in. But by and large, the book really needed to be told the way I was going with it, Kevin, through the people behind the scenes that are trying to be successful on his behalf.
What was the family's reaction to you when you met them?
I was fortunate, Kevin, from the standpoint that I did have one in. There was a guy named Jim that lived in Manitowoc that was a good close friend of the family ahead of time that had known me from some other stories I had done on Manitowoc and Manitowoc County. So I went over, I think the first time to the Avery salvage yard with a guy named Jim, older gentleman. He's about 70, 71 years old or so. And so he showed me around and introduced me to the family. And I went out there with Jim. I told, the family, knew that I was out there just to get to the bottom of the truth, and I wasn't out to screw them over or try to trick them or something like that.
Right, absolutely. Now, tell me about some of the police officers that you sort of traced from this case who have left the area and aren't with that local, police establishment anymore, and what their take on the whole case was as well.
Well, I did have, there was one individual in particular that comes to mind, Kevin, that had moved to the state of Arizona. He had left the sheriff's office, 15, 20 years ago, was a really good detective in that agency. And but he had worked there when there was a lot of shenanigans going on. So he kind of knew, how some of the people that he worked with over there operated. And he knew that they weren't, they regarded themselves sometimes as above the law, which means that they would cut corners or cheat or, engage in corruption if it meant covering up for somebody else in the department or that sort of stuff. And I was able to expose some of that in this book because there was a key case of a hit and run fatality involving a young teenage boy that may have been run over by an off-duty Manitowoc County Sheriff's officer. And so the same people then that all of our listeners and viewers are familiar with in Making a Murderer, they were the same people that investigated this hit and run fatality of a teenage boy, that the case basically immediately became a cold case from the get-go, and nobody really seemed to have a strong interest in trying to solve the case at the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office.
Right. Okay. Well, there's so many people doing sort of podcasts and YouTube shows, based on this case. There's so many. Well, I suppose you call them citizen journalists, maybe. Do you know what I mean? Do you think there's a bias sometimes with some people in this particular case, that it's difficult to look at it without, taking everything in, because it's so strong to show that maybe Stephen is not guilty, but then not much of the. If you met some other police officers that were involved in this case, they would say, actually, no, Stephen is 100% guilty of what happened.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with you on that point. Especially, oftentimes people come up with their own opinion early on a case, a high-profile case per se. And they stick to their guns and really aren't open-minded about, learning new information. And I certainly think that that's true with some of the advocates in this case too, where they're, not necessarily open to, look at, step back and realize, well, maybe this, Stephen could have done it, or maybe some of the evidence isn't necessarily all planted per se. I understand where they're coming from, but on the same token too, I wasn't there the night that this crime happened, October, of 31st of 2005. I couldn't say, with 100% certainty that Stephen Avery, is innocent, and I certainly, wouldn't say based on what I know that he's 100% guilty either. But I do believe that there's a lot of people out there that become crusaders or cheerleaders for a case, and it's also easy for them to build, a snowball effect and have other people jump on their bandwagon, because on a high profile case, it seems like that there's just there's a natural tendency for people to want to absorb and just, dissect and learn as much as they can about the case, especially if the person walks away from watching a television show, reading a book, or watching a Netflix documentary, and becomes convinced with the angle of the documentarian, the author, or the television journalist. So there's that immediate effort to want to kind of dissect more information, but then also there's other people that can take advantage of that, or either build their own brand, or maybe they just really strongly about their opinion, and then other people flock to them, because they share the same like-minded sentiment on the case.
Absolutely. And I would totally understand that as well. I think that happens a lot with different cases, especially a case like this. But what is your take on it then? Do you think that Stephen and Brandon Dassey are guilty of their crimes or not?
I would say probably not. And the reason why, again, some of this will go back to my other journalism experience and the other books I've written about. The fact is that I, like I said, 25 years I have in the industry as far as covering true crime. And it's very rare that you would have a homicide, a murder happen under the circumstances that both of them got convicted of. And again, let me backtrack and kind of explain that. Teresa Hallwick, 25 years old, goes out to the Avery salvage yard to do a photo shoot that day. She had been there several times before, had no problems going out there, wasn't fearful at all. If you buy the police and prosecution's theory, you would have Stephen Avery setting this crime up where it's premeditated, that he lures her into his trailer, starts raping her and attacking her, and then several minutes into this crime, Kevin, he's going to get a knock on his door, and that it's supposedly his nephew Brendan, who just got home from school, who finds an piece of mail in the in his mailbox that needs to go to his uncle. Here's some screaming, and then Steve's going to stop what he's doing and invite his nephew Brendan to participate in the crime. That set of circumstances never happens. I've never seen or read about a gang rape that happens where it's a premeditated crime by one person, and then they get interrupted several minutes later, to invite a family member in to participate. So that's the reason why that I don't really believe or buy the theory that the two of them committed the crime under the circumstances that they were both convicted of. Not saying, again, 100% sure that Stephen Avery is innocent, but I don't see it happening in the way that both of them were convicted, that this was a co-conspirator type of rape/murder, especially when there's no physical evidence then after the fact, then, Kevin, that's found at the location that was, where this crime supposedly happened.
I'm going to go back and forth with points against and for Stephen and Dassey, but obviously Dassey's confession fits perfectly with the sort of forensic evidence as well in some respects. I mean, how did he know what happened if he wasn't there?
As far as by that point in time too, several family members had already been, by the time he gets interviewed too, Kevin, several family members had already at least, had talked amongst themselves. There had been considerable television coverage, news media coverage of the case. And the other point too is that the way the interview was structured with him by the two police detectives, a lot of the questions that they're asking were done in a way that they were leading and coercive, I would say. And again, I'm just based on my own experience. That happened in my first case that I wrote a book about, the Bloody Lies book. It was a false confession because the police basically told the individual who had some, mild, mental health issues as far as his IQ was around 70. But basically, the person starts telling a story, or repeating, I should say, what the police believed had really happened. And it really, if you study the Brendan Dassey interviews, there's a lot of information that he gets fed, or he basically realizes, if I repeat this to the cops, that's what they're looking for, and he's not thinking that if he says this stuff, he's going to wind up in jail or prison the rest of his life. He's thinking he's going to get to go back to seventh period, at Michigan High School, or Two Rivers High School, wherever he was at.
Yeah. No, I mean, a forced confession. I mean, it's I watched that as well many times, and I've watched the docuseries quite a few times as well, and it's fascinating, and to see that take place, and that's not the first one of its type, if that is what happened. But then there's some of the evidence, in a sort of, I would say not discussed in Making a Murder was, for example, Teresa, when she met Avery, was kind of creeped out a bit when he was just wearing a towel when she knocked on the door.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that story is true. That's kind of a second or third hand type of story. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was true, but just, Stephen was, kind of an odd guy to begin with too. So, he had been involved in, types of different crimes, nothing really violent, if you throw out his sexual assault conviction that was committed by, an inmate named Gregory Allen. So, but he had been involved in, thefts and, burglaries and, and drinking types of, incidents when he was in his, teens and 20s. So, by no stretch of imagination was he a perfect guy. And he wouldn't be, he would certainly be the type that might, offend a woman or somebody, creep him out just based on his, his background.
And then when he contacted Teresa, he dialed *67 twice to, sort of withhold his details from her, because I think she had already made it clear to some of her colleagues as well that she did not like this man, and that, she didn't really want to go back down to, take these pictures. She was taking pictures of one of the cars that he was, trying to sell through her company, which it was her company. She worked for the Auto Trader locally.
Auto Trader, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so why did he withhold his number to her then, do you think?
That's a good question, Kevin. I just don't know if he was, fearful that just by giving her a number, she'd look and be like, oh God, is it that guy again, or is it do I need to go back there? But and I've heard other people say that he really didn't mean to dial star 67 on that. Then it's there's certainly those types of questions do. If you're of the strong opinion that that's a premeditated type of crime and that Stephen's the one that did it, those would be certainly the types of things that would play into a strong mindset as far as a premeditated type of crime. Yeah.
Okay, and then obviously there's the Holbrook's phone camera handbag on Avery's property as well. They found.
With the with the camera equipment, then again, that's one that if she was clearly killed on the property, it would make sense that you would find her material, clothing too, for example, as well, and camera equipment would be found, on the property. The question that really sticks out to me though is whether or not she was killed, on the Avery property, or whether the more likely scenario is that she met her demise, about a quarter to a half mile away at the Corey properties that are far behind where the Averys live. And that's where a lot of the bones, were ultimately discovered.
And we'll get to the bones in just a moment as well. But on the night of the crime, I believe as well that his mother saw bleach on his jeans as well. And I don't think he had any sort of alibi. It could have been, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was with Brendan, and I know that's one of the items that the police department spent a lot of time trying to find bleach and other material that would bolster their belief that they were trying to clean their clothes, or that Brendan was trying to clean his clothes after the crime, and certainly the bleach possibility would certainly fall into that evidence.
Did you do any research in the sense that there was rumors that Stephen had spoken to other fellow inmates about raping, torturing, and killing women, and burning their bodies to get rid of them as well? Did you investigate that?
Yeah, I did a lot of research on that. There was one individual in particular. There was one inmate that he seemed to be the one inmate that he was out of Marinette County. Evans was his name. I think it was Joe Evans, if I'm not mistaken. But he was, in fact, he wrote me a few times too, and he had sent letters to a lot of news media outlets. I'm strongly of the opinion that that's all BS. That this was an inmate that was clearly out to make a name for himself / try to get a better deal for himself. The way that some of his letters were typed, it basically was so outrageous, that you really couldn't take it seriously, regardless of whether or not you believe Stephen Avery was innocent or guilty. Even if you believed he was guilty, you would not really want to associate, or bring this Joe Evans guy, into the case after the fact and say, hey, look at these letters he's sending out now. These things just really it almost looked like somebody gave him a copy of, of the court documents, or he got them on his own and, was just really out to make a name for himself. But he did this on 2 separate occasions over a several year period where it was just, it just was a reminder that there's people out there that are con artists, and that they're in the prison system. You got to be careful, and that's probably why. People in prison that are good, reliable, witnesses in a crime after the fact. So
now, in Avery and Dassett's homes, there were bags of irons. And I'm sorry if I've got this wrong. I mean, this is so much to sort of research on this case, but and just to do in one day. But is that before I ask this question? Was there bags of irons that was found in Avery and Dassett's homes?
Bags of irons,
or irons in Avery's and but Avery allegedly brought them before the crime, and they matched sort of Dassett's description of how Teresa Holbrook was sort of tied up.
I mean, there was an issue about handcuffs that were found, that Stephen had, yeah. I mean, and that came up by, they were confiscated by the police, and that was a key point when the case went to trial. Kevin is, the prosecutor Ken Kratz had alleged that Stephen had tied up Teresa Halbach to his bedpost and was assaulting her, at the bed. But the strange thing about that is that these handcuffs, though, didn't have any DNA evidence on them that certainly bolstered that belief. And Stephen had maintained that he and one of his girlfriends had bought those, at a local, sex shop, as toys, for their rendezvous. So.
Well, what about the sort of bullet? The DNA matched Avery's rifle that was had Teresa's DNA on the bullet that was belonged to Avery.
Yeah, that's certainly again, depending on your theory of the case. I mean, it would certainly solidify or bolster, your belief that this was the bullet that was used to shoot her and kill her. Other people believe that thing was all, manufactured after the fact, because that bullet wasn't found during the first search of the garage when it happened back in November of 2005. It wasn't until the case was 4 or 5 months old, that Stephen Avery was already sitting in jail, that the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office goes back into the garage again. And then this time, the second time around, they claim that they located a couple bullet fragments that they somehow missed the previous time, Kevin. And then it's those fragments then that get sent into the Wisconsin State Crime Lab, and lo and behold, then, there's DNA evidence that ties it to Teresa Halbach.
But there was a tooth found, wasn't there, in the burn barrel? Isn't that right? There was Teresa Holt's tooth in Avery's fire pit. Sorry, it was in Avery's fire pit.
Yeah, I was going to say a fire pit. Right. Yeah, and let's see. There's always, that's a head scratcher. That again either proves that she must have been burned out there, or the other question is, where are all the other teeth, and why would only a portion of a tooth be found there and not the rest of her full mouth of teeth? So people always point out to me, they're like, there's always like the one fragment, one bullet fragment, the car keys even that were found in Stephen Avery's bedroom, weren't her real car keys. That was just a spare key. Her real car keys were never found to this day. And neither was really her purse, or whatever her identification cards, that kind of stuff, never been found to this day, which again leads one to think that maybe there's a different burial site, or whoever is the killer, did a good job of hiding a lot of or concealing a lot of the real evidence about her in the crime.
So what bones were recovered then, and where were they recovered?
Oh, sorry. Well, you did have from the burn barrel, and again, that's another. You had from Bobby Dassey's burn barrel, which again is Stephen's nephew, Brendan's brother, that lived right next door to him. You did have some bones that were found in that barrel. You did have Teresa's her leg or shin bone. That was the one that they believe was found at Stephen's in his burn pile pit. And then again later on in the case, you had these other bone fragments that were found out at the quarry that included the pelvic bone. And again, Kathleen Zellner and a lot of other people strongly believe that a lot of the bones that were found there, everything ties together, and that was the key location where the dismantling of the body, of Teresa's body, likely could have taken place. So there's three theories as far as where the dismantling takes place. One is just throwing her body into Stephen's burn pit on Halloween night after she died, earlier that day in the middle of the afternoon. The other theory is that she was sawed, or hacksawed to, after she was dead inside Bobby Dassey's garage by Bobby and Scott Tadich, perhaps, or that they were involved in dismantling of the body out at that quarry that's, again, about a half mile to quarter mile behind where they all live out there, the Averys. So
Yes, because Scott, which is Brendan Dass's brother, he had experience in dismantling carcasses because he was a sort of seasoned hunter, weren't he? Brendan wasn't really into hunting, was he, compared to his brother?
That's right. That's right. Bobby, his older brother, was really into hunting, and had his own rifle, and would do a lot of deer hunting along with us with Scott Cottage. Scott was kind of like their stepdad, and wasn't their real biological dad, if I remember right. But he was there a lot. But yeah, you're right about Brendan. Brendan really was not into hunting, and again, as people have told me that were on this case, including one of the investigators that helped on the defense for Dean Strang and Jerry Buting, but has since passed away in the last year or so. Pete Bates, who was in the Making a Murder, but Pete had always told me, and he was a retired Illinois state policeman. He was always the opinion that whoever was involved in this crime had to have experience with animals, because he said just dismantling a body like this is just such a messy, and kind of gory, thing to do. And it would really take somebody that really knows how to do that firsthand, has experience with this, because as Pete had told me, he's like, just dismantling a body like that, John. He's like, it's not an easy thing to do, especially if you are of the opinion that Stephen Avery also wasn't much of a hunter himself, and that certainly Brandon wasn't. So.
Do you think it's possible then, John, that Bobby and Scott could be involved in the murder along with Brandon and Stephen, and that they helped dispose of the body for these two, because they were just blood is thick in the water in a sense with family, and has that ever crossed your mind?
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked the question that way, as far as the overlapping of family members. I've been asked the question of like, well, Scott and Bobby teaming up, or Brendan and Stephen and maybe Earl and Chuck, the two families kind of. But I've never had a question like kind of bringing them all together. And I would say that's definitely possible, considering the close family ties, and like you said, the overlap. It's could two have been involved and then two other helped? Absolutely. The reason why that part of me, though, just kind of dismisses that is because once you get into conspiracies, it's really gets hard to kind of get too many people involved before people start ratting each other out and stuff. And in this case, it's always kind of been the opposite. Bobby and Scott have never really done anything to even help Brendan, who's their own brother and stepson, to try to get out of this mess. And I would think it's more likely that if they think Brendan's innocent, then they could think Stephen's guilty, but they should be fighting to help get Brendan released from custody.
No, right, okay, yeah, but as you say, there's been no sort of love between the family to want to help each other there. I wonder what the relationship is in keeping in contact with each other, if they have kept in contact with each other, or whether that's not been the case.
It's pretty strained, and I do get into a little bit of that in the Wrecking Crew, just because there were some taped phone conversations. Actually, it was kind of interesting. There was a little bit of eavesdropping. So Scott Tadich, well, just to remind everybody, so Stephen Avery has one sister. He has the two brothers that run the salvage yard, Earl and Chuck, but he has one sister, and that's Barb. And Barb is the mother then of Brendan Dassey, Bobby Dassey, and there were two other boys as well. And then she's married to Scott Tadich. During one of the phone conversations between Steve and his sister, Barb, a couple years ago, Scott Tadich was eavesdropping and listening in on the calls, and he just becomes ballistic and starts screaming and cussing out Avery, saying it's like, you're dead, you MFer, I can't wait to get my hands on you. And then Avery's kind of telling his sister, look at this guy, he's explosive. No wonder why my lawyer's looking at him as possibly being a accomplice, in the murder and stuff. So it's interesting, but yeah, I mean, Scott Tadich definitely has a temper. I would not see. I'm of the opinion though that if somebody other than Steve Avery was involved in the crime, though, it would not be Scott Tadich by himself. He may have helped out like disposing of a body or helping conceal a crime. But I don't see Scott Todich of being the other perpetrator if it was somebody other than Steve Avery.
What did they find on Brendan Dass's brother's computer, Bobby, when they searched his computer?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of disturbing violent child pornography, pornography involving I'm trying to remember what animals and stuff like that. So it was that kind of fed into the theory and the belief of Avery's lawyer Kathleen Zellner that that Bobby was consumed by a lot of this this violent hardcore pornography, and that drove him over the edge as far as that he became obsessed and fascinated with Teresa Hallbeck, and that that he may have hunted her down and stalked her, and that he would be responsible for killing her off site, again, if the crime happened the way that Zellner believes it did.
And that's what she's going down right now. With Stephen Avery's lawyer, Catherine, where does she stand right now with his case? Where are they at with the case?
Well, it's kind of been moving at a slow pace for the last year or two. It's at the Court of Appeals in the state of Wisconsin, so it's not at a federal judiciary, which I think if Avery was in a federal system, he'd have a much better chance of getting a new trial a lot quicker. Zellner's hope right now is to get the case sent back to Manitowoc County or maybe Sheboygan County, just because of jurisdiction, but to get it sent back for an evidentiary hearing. And she was unable to get the local judge, Angie Suckowitz, to agree to that for whatever reason. It didn't happen. So now Zellner's at the Court of Appeals, and they've been filing hundreds of pages of briefs, her and the state of Wisconsin, pointing out their reasons, their arguments of why, the first trial, was legitimate. Stephen Avery should be in prison, or from Zellner's standpoint, that there was a lot of, Brady violations, which means, that the prosecution cheated or abused its authority and power, but basically that Stephen Avery should get a new trial. And we're kind of waiting for the Court of Appeals to issue a ruling.
And how's that being funded for Stephen? Is she doing that on a sort of free basis, just to do with with the publicity of the case?
I think pretty much that's the case. Yeah, she's. I mean, there's been times I think where she's accepted donations, but she's not really going out of her way to milk the public or milk the trough, for donations. She's pretty much that problem.
Yeah, so her firm's obviously dealing with many other cases, but this is one of the
correct
main cases that she's felt drawn to want to. But has she ever had clients in the past that she got out and she felt that in the end, in years to come, that actually they did do the crime and she got them out and she was regretful for that?
Well, the first case, I think that she really took that when she was testing the waters as a younger attorney. She took and she was doing some public defender work, Kevin, at that point in time. And there was a guy that she was asked to help out on his case. I think he was at that point, his name was Larry Eiler. He's since died, but he was facing the death penalty in Illinois, and he'd been involved in several. He was convicted. He was linked to be a serial killer, but I think he had only been proven to have murdered. He had only been convicted of, I think, one murder at that point in time. She was asked to take the case on to try to find evidence to overturn his conviction in the case. And through her interviews of Eiler and her own research into the case, she became convinced that he was in fact a serial killer. And then through her efforts, she was able to ultimately help the police, solve and close a lot of these other cases that Larry Eiler had been suspected of committing, but had never been charged with committing. And it was because of that case, she had an epiphany, Kevin, that she decided she's not going to be the type of defense lawyer that's going to help, quote, get the guilty people off on a technicality. And that if she ever is going to take a case for somebody that claims that they're innocent, even though they've been sent away to prison or on death row for a murder, that they claim that they didn't commit, she's going to make damn sure that she's sure that they're not full of her later in life, in her career.
Okay. And with Teresa's boyfriend at the time, was there much research that you did into him? Because he seemed on the docuseries to be very, he didn't want to, to come forward again, did he much, to help out with the case as time went on?
Right. In fact, I remember I called him one time when I still worked in Wisconsin, so long before I was, really super deep into the book, but I had tried to interview him. Ryan Hilgus, and he was really it was kind of an odd conversation, but basically, the long and short of it was that he did not not want to be interviewed, even if it was just going to be a story about talking about how the documentary portrayed him, that kind of stuff. He really was trying to move on or stay out of the public limelight at that point in time. But no, you're right. I mean, I did spend some time researching him as a journalist, and certainly as putting the book together. Even though a lot of crimes are committed by a domestic abuser or somebody that's involved in a relationship, I really didn't find any strong hard evidence that really could pinpoint a time and a motive. Looking at Ryan Hilgus, I know some people out there certainly that believe in Steve Avery's innocence, are convinced that he would be the prime suspect or he'd be the most likely one because of, like you just said, Kevin, that he was evasive at times. He seemed to kind of be, one step ahead of the cops. Oftentimes, he seemed to kind of want to work himself into the investigation where, it's not just the police doing the investigation, but Ryan Hilgus is kind of helping, coordinate things, which then also gives him an in as far as what the police are up to. Those are things that kind of, are a little fishy, looking back at him, but I just never really got to the point where he seemed to be like the obvious person that would have done the crime if Stephen Avery didn't. Okay.
Now, thank you for that. And Ken Kratz, the former lawyer and district attorney for Wisconsin, who was part of the original trial. What did you do with him in the sense of research, in the sense of contacting him? Was there any contribution from him?
I'm trying to remember with the book. I don't think I really reached out to him. I had interviewed him on different occasions when I was a reporter in Wisconsin, but a lot of the material that I utilized for the book was material that really dealt with his disciplinary hearing in Wisconsin, dealing with a lot of the allegations. And the other thing too is I think Ken Kratz oftentimes is a liar. So I really didn't want to have him come back and tell me that he already had a chance to refute a lot of this information, but it led to his suspension, from Wisconsin. And I wanted to kind of let people know, here's some of the cases that he was involved with at the same time or, prior to the prosecution of Teresa Halbach. So the thing about Kratz is that unlike a lot of attorneys that I've worked with over the years, I mean, he just seemed like he just goes out of his way to be a showboat. And prosecutors for the most part that I've always dealt with are just kind of like, they do their job. If they their job is to get a conviction, but not let the case then, propel their career or, even turn it into a book as prosecutors is considered, somewhat unethical by a lot of lawyers. But the fact is the guy twists the facts a lot of times. And trust me, I've dealt with a lot of prosecutors and 95% of them are very reputable and noble and have been portrayed, in a high regard in a lot of my other books. But Kratz he's just an odd duck and a really strange guy. And I think this case would have been, justice would have been better served if a different prosecutor convicted Stephen Avery, because Kratz just doesn't carry a lot of credibility, and and the versions that he came up with at trial may not be the real facts of the crime, even if Stephen Avery did commit the crime.
Right. Okay. And obviously, we're sort of going over here, just whether innocent people here have been framed for this murder, and what's your take on, planted evidence, and why do you think if you have gone down that road, that would even be a reality?
Well, I would say, one thing is, first of all, is I do have experience with the plant evidence stuff. My first book I did, the Bloody Lies one, in about 6-7 years ago, but it was about a CSI that I knew really well in Wisconsin. I'm sorry, in Nebraska, and he ultimately went to prison because he was planting evidence and in several murder cases, and he had gotten away with it in different cases until everything kind of snowballed. So I kind of know what to look for as far as if you're going to plant evidence, here's how you could do it and get away with it. And also how you can get, then how it could, come back against you after the fact. The thing about the Avery case is that there's just so many, oftentimes in the evidence planting cases, Kevin, you have a pattern of the police going back to the same location to search it again and again and again. And it's like the third or fourth time is when they, quote, find the evidence. So if you're really doing a good job the first couple times around, you're usually not going to even need to go back, because it's going to be like, well, we searched that bedroom, we searched that garage. Why would something be there 5 months later? If it wasn't there the first time. And again, especially when we're talking about Stephen Avery's bedroom, the bedroom, and I've been to that, trailer several times, the thing's about as big as a shoebox. So it's really small. And to have 3 or 4 police officers searching that bedroom like they did, for 4 or 5 hours on the first night of the case, several days before Stephen's ultimately arrested, but they don't find any evidence in there, and they certainly don't find any keys. And it's not until the third or fourth time that they're kind of really, zeroed in on trying to make the arrest of Stephen Avery that you have all these strange pieces of evidence kind of all falling together several days after the fact. And in my opinion, Kevin, the strangest pieces of evidence are, that little key, the spare key that gets found on the bedroom carpet, on Tuesday, November 8th of 2005, which would have been like the 4th or the 5th day of the investigation that Teresa's been missing. You have this license plate, this crumbled up license plate from her vehicle that gets found on that same day as well. But the police had already done a huge, massive search of that whole salvage yard 2 days earlier, and didn't find it then at that point in time. And I was just going to say, and again, it's one of the situations that it's odd that if you would have thought that if you would have been if I would have led that search and you would have been working for me that day, and let's just say we got 80, you would have came back and said, hey, John, we got 80% of the salvage yard done, but we still are missing 20%. It would have made more sense that you go back the very next day. But what's odd about that is that they search the yard on Sunday, don't find anything. They don't do the follow-up search the next day. They wait till Tuesday, and then Tuesday is going to again be the same day that they're going to also go back and find the spare key. They're going to find that license plate that's all bent up, and that's also the day that they find the bone or the bones out at the little burn pit, which again, they've been out there 4 or 5 days. I'm not saying that there weren't bones at the burn pit, but that's one of the head scratchers that with so many police out there, over so many days, it's really hard. And I've walked that area. It's hard to believe that, they all missed it. Maybe they did, but just when you add up all these things all being found, like on the 5th day of the case, it tells me that they felt under pressure, from their superiors that, hey, this is the bastard we believe committed this crime. We need to find the evidence to nail him, and we're running out of time. We can't have this property for the next 6 years,
So you're saying that maybe the burned bones were moved from the quarry over to the burn pit to frame Stephen and obviously Brendan in the end.
Correct.
And but nothing was actually done there. There was no crime committed there at that location, and there was no bodily fluids found in Avery's home, was there? That belonged to Teresa or anyone else, and semen or anything like that. No.
Right. That's correct. Yeah. That's again why people have asked me over the years, and I've said, hey, I'm not 100% convinced that Stephen Avery is innocent, but I believe that if Stephen Avery did commit the crime, that it probably happened under different circumstances that he was arrested and convicted of. For example, I'll just tell you this, right next to his property, there's this little cellar, okay? I mean, it's like a cellar you'd go for just avoid a tornado. And it always, it's literally not that far from the burn pit. But I remember when I went out there, I'm thinking to myself, that would have made a much better circumstance as far as like Avery pushed her down into the little cellar or attacked her down there. That would have made more logical sense to me if this was a premeditated type of crime than the facts that they came up with to get him convicted. At his trial.
Do you think it's a bit far-fetched though to say that the police at that time would have gone to all that length when it wasn't their money being paid out from any government funds, in the sense that they never owed them money if Stephen was going to get the big payout, and to give those orders from wherever those orders would have been given from to bury him, to make him look like he's done this, that's just something that only happens in the movies. That's not reality.
I would say that's probably true. But I would also point out too, in a small town like that, if Stephen, you're right, it wouldn't have been their money out of their own pocket per se, as far as like the sheriff and the detectives, because Ferrick probably wouldn't have had to pay or mortgage his house or sell his house, although it's a possibility. But the fact is, probably an insurance company would have paid out the firm or paid out the money. But the fact is, those people also did not want to see Stephen Avery become a multimillionaire, and then living amongst them then too. So that would have irritated them. And just the fact that he would have one up them, as far as, they just in the realm of public opinion, they would have looked like the biggest fools in the world, because it would have also, some of them were still going around telling people that he still committed the rape, even though the DNA evidence proved he was innocent and Gregory Allen committed that crime. So there was a lot of this was just, trying to save face too, Kevin.
Yep. And again, as you said at the beginning of this conversation, none of us were there. And sometimes things can happen, strange things can happen, like this, like he could have done this. And, as you say, we'll never know. It's all, it's based on the evidence. It has been shown that he did. But I mean, for this to be rigged, then obviously the jury would have had to been rigged as well, or misled. Should we say that?
Misled, I would say, yeah. Just because my experience with juries is that. Now I do know that there are some people that filed the Stephen Avery case that do believe that strongly, that some of the jurors were put on there for a reason, and maybe part of that's true, but I think by and large it's more likely than not, if Stephen Avery was innocent or is innocent, that the jury would have been misled. No different than some of my other cases that I've written about. Like I said,
okay. And let's just look at the planted evidence. So we've got Teresa's car was planted on the Avery lot. Avery's blood was planted in Teresa's car. Bullets were planted in Avery's garage. Teresa's keys were planted in Avery's bedroom, and his DNA was planted on the keys. Teresa's bones were planted in the fire pit, and the hood latch swab was planted from Avery's groin swab.
Mm-hmm. Right. The groin swabs. That's right. Yeah, I forgot about those.
Yeah, but that's quite a big to do, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, right, and that's true. But on the same token too, if you had already gotten away with planting evidence, on a case 3 times, why would you not do it 4 or 5 or 6 times? You know what I'm saying? So. I'm just saying, if there is evidence that's planted, Kevin, I think it's more likely that there's 5 or 6 pieces of evidence planted in this case, rather than just 1 or 2 pieces of evidence planted. So I think that but again, there may be 0 pieces of evidence planted. I mean, only God knows.
Well,
for sure.
I mean, okay, just look at the groin swab. It is said that the nurse who took the groin swab, threw it into a Sharpie bin herself. That is that right? That the groin swab disappeared and that she threw it away. The nurse did.
Well, that's kind of disputed as far as I know. Avery, who watched this happen, disputed that, and was always the opinion that again, the 2 officers that were there, one was Mark Wiegert and the other one was Tom Fassbender. And, kind of as a timeout for everybody, this never even should have been happening because they already had Stephen Avery's DNA. So this whole peculiar event of even taking him to the hospital to be getting additional DNA from him to begin with is strange and peculiar. Even if you believe strongly that Stephen Avery is 100% guilty, I'm totally fine. But just for everybody that feels that way, it's just an odd set of circumstances as far as why are these two guys of all people, bringing, him there to the hospital to get additional DNA swabs, let alone taking him, from the groin, unless, again, if you're the opinion that these incidents are being framed, that would, make sense to you as far as a believer that, hey, why would these guys are doing this? Because they want to use they realize that there may come a time later in this case that they're going to need to harvest some additional evidence, to help, and they may have believed he was a guilty guy. So it could have been, people sometimes just think, framing an innocent person. They could have felt that Stephen Avery was guilty and that maybe they had half the evidence they needed, but they wanted to make sure that they had super strong evidence. That's what my guy in Nebraska did. He thought he was framing guilty people. That's what he ultimately got screwed up because he messed up in a false confession case. But he was thinking that he would just find that one or two extra pieces of evidence, Kevin, and that's what was going to get the case over the hump, and it usually did. And then he got some glory out of it, and and took a lot of credit for it. So sometimes if there is evidence planting, it's because the police really, really feel strongly that they're just shoring up a couple holes in a case, against somebody that's really bad and really needs to be taken out, out of society for the betterment of the public.
Yes, agreed. And in regards to the bullets, right, that were recovered, now, were they recovered in the garage, Avery's garage?
Correct. Yes. Yeah, they were. There was a couple fragments. Now, just to remind people, the Averys did a lot of target practice and shooting, and also shot at varmints like squirrels, raccoons, beavers, all that kind of stuff out there. So there was already a lot of, shells throughout that property because, again, they were, constantly shooting, and so were other, extended family members and friends as well.
Right, so. But they did find a bullet that was connected to the shooting potentially of
Correct.
Teresa. Yeah.
Right. Correct.
So the prosecution never claimed the bullet recovered that went through Teresa's skull. What they're saying is there was 10 shell casings were recovered, and the prosecution believes she was shot multiple times. Some bullets not hitting her skull. So not finding bone on the bullet basically doesn't discredit the prosecution neither, does it really?
Probably not. No, I would say, yeah. I mean, I'm not a technical expert as far as with the DNA, as far as just kind of, as far as that a bullet fragment that would go through the skull. But I would just say, for the sake of argument, I mean, it's likely that would have had something to do with the crime rather than being a completely phony piece of evidence.
There was a guy called Robert Fabian, a friend of Earl Avery, one of Stephen's brothers.
Avery, right.
Yeah, and he did state that he saw Stephen between 4:30 and 5 p.m. on the 31st of October, freshly cleaned with a change of clothing, acting very strangely and having a fire in the burn barrel where Teresa's electronics were found. Did you get a chance to speak to him, or?
Fabian, I did not. I remember I tried to reach him a couple times. I think there was some people. It's kind of interesting with the making a murder stuff, Kevin. Some people just came out of the woodwork and were really, easy to find and and always available, very accessible for interviews. And then other people just kind of went incognito and really didn't want any publicity or wanted recognition. And Fabian was one of them. So I never did get a chance to interview.
I know we've gone over our time here, and we are at the end of this interview right now. And I know there's just so much that we haven't spoken about. I mean, this is such a big case. Do you know what I mean? There is so much to this. It would take me months and months to absorb it all. Do you know what I mean? Not just rewatching the murder docuseries, but just the transcript, just all of this. There's so much. Do you think that you would continue to sort of probe this case and keep moving forward as the case moves forward? Do you think this is it for you, or there's more to this for you?
It depends, Kevin. I would say if Stephen Avery's conviction gets overturned, then I would say that there would probably be a good chance that I would want to continue on with it. But as long as the case is kind of stuck at the Court of Appeals and really not going anywhere, for a while, then I'm kind of, at the fork in the road. So it's just, I just would hope that we get a ruling sometime in the near future, sooner than later. I'm kind of surprised that we're having this conversation now and we still don't have, a verdict yet from the Court of Appeals on the case. As far as whether or not he's going to get a new trial or not, I realize the system takes slow going. So I've covered my share of cases. I know the federal system especially is slow too. But I would have just thought with all the filings already that have been done that the court would have been moving a lot faster and that we'd have some.
Well, I suppose there's Corona in there as well, which has delayed a lot of the big cases as well in some respects, or giving them a chance to slow things down to make sure they're going to come up with the right decision. But yeah, and I suppose I've heard as well that Ken Kratz has got his own docu-series coming out soon. I don't know if that's true or not, or there is an opposing docu-series coming out on the making.
Yeah, I think there is. Yeah, I think, yeah. I'll be curious to see what that, what's aired in that then. Again, there's certainly a lot of interest in this case, and it certainly hasn't waned in the last couple of years, even though it's been a few years since the Making Murder originally had come out, Kevin, that's for sure.
With original court transcripts and documentation, is that something that you have, and you've got a lot of that stuff, or?
Yeah, I do have a lot of it. I was gonna say a lot of it. I was gonna say thankfully it's I have it on computer or thumb drive because it would take up my whole basement. I had it all in just paper form. So there was the times when I was a reporter, I would go to Matlock and, get the hard copies of, the binders where the books, whereas as far as just the Zellner filings and stuff like that. I remember one was like 1,600 pages. And she did like one of her first filings on the case. And I think it was, May or June of 2016. We were all, hot to trotting at the courthouse for her first court appearance over there. But I know she would have felt. I know she would have felt that this case. She would have expected that we would have had a verdict by now too. I mean, I don't think. I know she knows the system takes a while, but I think she's probably disappointed that it hasn't gone in her favor at this point in time. But it's out of her control.
Absolutely. Well, John, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you having you on. It's been really interesting. I hope I've done my best here to sort of move this forward.
You've asked some great questions.
It is a very difficult case, and it's definitely not clear cut. But just thank you for bearing with me, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much, and Kevin. It was a great conversation, and certainly feel free to have me on again in the future if you want to talk about it.